Well, that being said, we might as well start up at the top because the Bills came away with Keon Coleman. The only wide receiver that they drafted was Keon Coleman. So they did not trade up for Brian Thomas, and they actually traded back with Carolina. They passed up on Xavier Leggett, and they got Keon Coleman. Now, I think Keon Coleman is very nice, but I was just a little bit surprised because I think you could have gotten everything that you had with Coleman, but the speed and more of the freakish athleticism with Xavier Leggett. But regardless, I do like Keon Coleman, even if he can't separate as well or he doesn't have that top-notch speed. He's a big-bodied receiver. He's not afraid to go over the middle, go up, make the tough contested catch. He can block. He loves to block. He wants to be in Buffalo. He likes Josh Allen, and he just seems like a great guy in general. So overall, I do like that pick. But I think the looming question that's hanging over this fan base right now is, who is Stephon Diggs' replacement? Is he currently on the roster? Did they view Keon Coleman as wide receiver 1, or is he an upgraded version of Gabe Davis at wide receiver 2? And are we going to see a trade in the next few weeks? You know, Trey White's $10.2 million cap hit savings kicks in June 1st. Could Beane be looking on the market right now? Because the fact that they did not double dip at wide receiver in this loaded class, I think that says a lot. He's got to be up to something, right?
He doesn't have to be up to something, but I think that the chances are very high that he is. I think none of us fans are going to sit here and pretend like Khalil Shakir is the number one wide receiver. I don't think any of us are going to sit here and pretend that Curtis Samuel is anything better than a potential 2. And that Keon Coleman at this point isn't behind those 2 guys as of right now, being just drafted, even though he was a second-round pick, nearly a first-round pick. He was our first overall pick. But this isn't the first time that the Buffalo Bills under Brandon Beane have selected first in the second round. They did that with A.J. Epinesa that year. A little further back, but he didn't really start his first year either. He was on a rotational basis and didn't take a whole lot of snaps. I think that the potential for the wide receiver 1 to be on this roster is there, but I wouldn't count on it. And so with next year's draft, you got a couple extra picks. You got two second-round picks. Maybe some teams think that we're not going to be so good and are willing to part ways with a T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk for that 1 overall pick that we have next year, but I'm not positive about that, and I don't know who else would be on the market. Maybe someone like a Cortland Sutton, who's 28 years old and could probably go for a 4th. Well, we just traded our 5th for a 4th. If Stephon Diggs is worth a 2nd, and I think he's much better than Cortland Sutton, maybe. Also, I think that would probably be a good mentor for a big guy like Keon Coleman and how to get open in the NFL. So there's guys like that out there. I would prefer probably him over Ayuk and T. Higgins just because of the cost of the player. So I think there are options open, but I don't think it's a we have to type of deal.
Yeah, so overall, was Keon Coleman my favorite wide receiver prospect going into the draft? No, but I think it's a very solid pick. He fills a need. And again, I think he is well-rounded enough to where the Bills will be able to use him in a way that we really haven't seen before because he is that big body, go up and get that tough grab, So I do like the Coleman pick. I love the Cole Bishop pick. He was a guy who was on my board. I had him going to the Bills in the 3rd round after a trade that I had worked out in my mock, getting back into the 3rd, but they took him at pick 60, so that shows that they really, really wanted him. Beane was pumped. He was like, let's effing go. If you saw that video in the Bills draft room. So Cole Bishop is a guy who can play 3 levels of the defense. He has great coverage ability, but he's a great tackler as well. And they say that he's better when he's closer to the line of scrimmage. So that is the safety of the future with Jordan Poyer and potentially Micah Hyde being off this team. Love that pick from the Bills. And here's the thing with Bishop. He is a very, very good athlete, as his RAS score, I believe, was a 9.86, which was one of the best scores in history out of any of the safeties who tested. So Cole Bishop, love that pick. Now, the 3rd round pick with Dwayne Carter, here's where I got a little bit skeptical because I was thinking, man, Troy Franklin sitting right there. If you get a big body receiver in Keon Coleman, you could pair him beautifully with a guy like Troy Franklin, a slender frame who has a route running ability. He has the speed, the vertical deep threat. I thought that would have been a great combination. But ultimately, they passed on him, and they got Dwayne Carter, the defensive tackle from Duke. Now, this is more of a rotational piece. He'll be Ed Oliver's backup. I do really like the player. We'll just have to wait and see if I like the pick because, again, everything just keeps coming back to that wide receiver room for me. Yeah. But then today, they got Ray Davis, running back from Kentucky. he wasn't a guy on my board. I liked Audric Estime or Isaiah Davis a little bit later on, or even Braylon Allen, who went 6 picks later to the Jets. But I think Ray Davis fills a need. And again, he seems like a high character guy. He fills what the Bills were looking for in that RB2. And he led the nation with 7 receiving touchdowns as a running back last year.
Mhm.
So then, as you'll see on our ticker down here, in round 5, the Bills did get Cedric Tran Granger. Now, I didn't think that they were going to get him because I thought this was a 3rd or 4th round talent. So I thought that the Bills could get Hunter Norzad here or Tanner Bortolini. So I think this is a very solid move considering that he fell by a lot of pundit standards. So now the question is, can he beat out Connor McGovern? And by beating out McGovern, that means you would kick him back to left guard. David Edwards becomes the first backup off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Next, the Bills got Edifon Elefosio, another guy that we're going to have to get the pronunciation down for.
That was pretty good.
But thank you. First try. Coverage linebacker. I think this is a very solid pick as well. Again, he wasn't on my board. I didn't think that linebacker was a need considering you have 2 All-Pros coming back in Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard. They signed Nicholas Morrow. They have Dorian Williams sitting there, Balin Spector. So this is essentially the Tyler Matakevich replacement for now as that 6th linebacker. But I think he can definitely jump up on the depth chart. So then right after, they got Javon Solomon, an edge rusher from Troy. Now, this is a guy who was on my board. So I think with my bias a little bit here, I think this is why I like this pick a little bit more than the others.
I like it too.
But, I mean, 16 sacks, which led to FBS last year. And he's a high motor guy. It seems like, again, good athleticism, good character. And I think you can kind of slow play him. And you can teach him under Von Miller's tutelage, and he can become more of a presence as time goes on. And then moving on, I wasn't too sure about the final picks for the Bills. They got 2 tackles and a corner. We were saying that they needed a corner, but this guy's 5'9", not even 180 pounds. He is essentially a backup slot corner. He can play special teams, so I'm fine with that. But the fact that they got another tackle, I mean, they got the first tackle, and then they double dipped of all positions. They double dipped at offensive tackle. And I thought they were pretty set here because you're bringing back Deion Dawkins on that extension. You have Spencer Brown. They signed Lael Collins. You have Tommy Doyle coming back from his injury. Ryan Vandermark is looking promising. Richard Garage. But regardless, they double dipped at tackle. And I thought that it seemed like wide receiver could be in play. But then again, based on how many times they passed up on guys like Troy Franklin or Brendan Rice, I kind of knew that they weren't going to go wide receiver. So I was thinking they could have gotten another boundary corner, someone like an MJ Devonshire, Dwight McLaughlin. I was a big Jarius Monroe guy. But again, they double dipped. Regardless, I don't think that those final couple picks should move the needle that much. So I would give Brandon Beane a solid B here. I don't think he necessarily hit this draft out of the park, but I think it was far from his worst draft. So I think he did a lot to improve the 2024 Bills and beyond.